This whole thing at this point is totally inevitable. The system's going to come down. The Federal Reserve has created this mess. And they're boxed into a corner now. It's going to happen. There's no way out. They're forced into rising interest rates at this point. They're going to try to sell their toxic balance book. They're going to try. But they're probably not going to be successful at selling their toxic balance book. They're not going to get very far, let's put it this way, before the system comes down around them. Now, here's where it gets dangerous, is when the system comes down. Right now, the debt has went exponential. The whole problem is from the very foundation, this whole thing is built on an enormous Ponzi scheme. The world's biggest Ponzi scheme, the biggest Ponzi scheme that's ever existed. But like all Ponzi schemes, it reaches a point, like what I call it, a point of inflection, where it can't grow any further. It starts to collapse in upon itself. There's only a matter of months left at this point. Seriously. It's in the math. This thing is going to shut down. And this is where it gets dangerous, because there's a fork in the road here that we're coming up to. And the Fed's going to have control. The central banks of the world are going to have control. There's going to be a little window of opportunity that they can crawl through to lessen. I'm not going to say to actually stop a tragedy from happening to the entire planet, and themselves included. They think that they can escape it somehow as being the elite. If they let this thing fold in, all these elites out there who think, hey, you know what, we want to depopulate the world, we want this agenda, whatever, we want what's written on the Georgia Guidestones, so let the economic crisis come and all these poor people will die, and we as the elite, we will find security in our underground base or whatever. This is their way of thinking. We'll find security because we've got stuff stashed away. We've got food. We've got this. We've got underground bases. We've got 10-year supply of food or whatever. We even got air. We even got oxygen tanks down in our underground facilities. We got an elevator down there. We got a wonderful bed. They've probably tried their bed out down there, and they got a full stock refrigerator, and they've got diesel engines to provide them with electricity down there. They even got the latest movies. They got everything. And they think to themselves, oh, let those guys up on the surface. They'll all be toast. I'll drive my my Porsche down, or my Audi. I'll have my chauffeur drive me down to my underground facility. I'll take the elevator down, and I'll lay in bed while the whole world crashes. And then when it's done crashing, I'll come back up to the surface again. And I'll be one of the elites still. And I'll be ruling everything. This is the way they think. It won't work that way. There's a small window of opportunity that the world's central banks are going to have to stop this thing. And if they don't take that small window of opportunity and actually stop this thing, it's going to lead to a tragedy, and all of these elites, all of their children, everyone's going to be extinguished, not just us. Not just us people out here who don't have the underground facilities. It's going to be them too. And I'm going to explain to you in this episode why. And there's a small window of opportunity they have to keep this meltdown from, when it's melting down, they'll have a small window to stop it from melting down further. Almost like they did in 2008. It started to melt down in 2008, it really did. And they stopped it. They will have that opportunity to stop it this time. But even more so, this time they're going to actually have the opportunity to set things back to normal again, to reset the entire system so that this doesn't happen again. Because in 2008, what they did was they bandaged over the problem, and that's why we're facing the problem again, but this time in spades, this time far more seriously, facing the exact same problem as we were in 2008. They're going to have a small window of opportunity. Now, in this episode, I'm going to try to explain what that window is, what direction the Fed's going to have to actually move in, and the direction I think that they will move in, unless they are totally insane. And if they're insane, and if they think that they're going to let the system melt down, then the meltdown will catch them too, and it'll burn them too, and they won't get away. And I'll explain to you in this episode why they won't get away either. So now let's get right into it. First off, we're headed toward a meltdown of the derivatives market, a meltdown of the financial markets that's going to involve a credit freeze. And when it strikes, it's going to strike awful fast. The markets are going to melt down. Bitcoin, when the markets first start to melt down, Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies are going to melt up. Then when the meltdown gets worse, then they'll melt down too. And everything's going to melt down except for gold and silver and fiat. At first, the first stage of it, fiat, is going to melt up. But then fiat will melt down the second stage. Now I'm going to explain to you what the stages are. In the first stage is when it's going to be deflation. The first stage of this is going to be deflation. It's going to be a deflationary crisis where liquidity is drying up so fast, it's going to be like a monstrous margin call. And everybody is going to be calling on everybody, basically calling it in. So you got your banks, they're going to be going under, and they're going to be calling up the bank next to them and saying, hey, you know what? We've got assets in your bank. We need those assets now. Now. And so they're going to have to liquidate. And when they liquidate, then they go under. The guy next to them is going to say, hey, you know what? Those assets we have in your bank, we need them now. And so everybody's going to be doing now. We need the money now. Everything's liquidating. They're going to be liquidating everything. There's going to be a massive panic. The derivative market's going to melt down. Everything's going to be liquidated. We're going to find out who is actually, it's like when the water goes out, the tide goes out, we're going to see who's naked. This is what's going to happen. And this is going to come, and it's going to come fast. The world's central banks are going to freeze with fear at first. Everything's going to suddenly freeze. They're going to have to freeze the system. And during this time frame, what's going to happen is, when this deflation is hitting and they freeze the system, you're going to have trouble getting cash. And they're not going to take anything that's involved with credit. They're not going to take your debit cards. They're going to freeze your bank account. The banks are going to be closed. The cash machine will still be open, the ATM, but everybody's going to have to use it. So there's going to be big long lines at the ATM. And you know what the bank's going to do? They're going to say, okay, you're limited to how much you can take out at the ATM. But then they're going to pull another trick that you don't expect. When they bring the cash in, they fill the ATM up each morning, they're only going to put a limited amount of cash in there, so it's only going to be like the first 50 or 100 people that's going to be able to withdraw their amount. And then everybody's going to have to go home for the rest of the day and come back the next day. So you're going to be waiting in a hot, sweaty line up to the ATM machine. People are going to be angry, they're going to be fighting, they're going to be saying, I haven't got any money to buy baby formula. Seriously, you're going to be mad mothers there trying to hit people. People are going to not have I don't have money to buy my medication. Can you imagine what they're going to be like? And they're all going to be blaming it on the Federal Reserve at that point. And be looking to the Federal Reserve to fix this. Well, there's a small window here that they have to actually fix this. Because when everything freezes up, and the system basically grinds to a stop, except for just almost like exactly, do you remember what happened in Cyprus? A couple years back when they had the banking crisis in Cyprus and everything froze up and there's big long lines at the ATM machines and everything? It's going to be like that, except it's going to be nationwide. And they're only going to want to take cash. Cash is going to be king at that point. The stores and everything. You go into a store and they're going to say, oh, our ATM, none of that works today. You're going to have to pay with cash. This is why I'm telling you guys put away the $5 bills. It's for this period in time. But this period in time is not going to last long. It's not going to last long. What I believe is going to happen next is I believe that the world's central banks are going to convene in meetings because this is going to be a crisis situation. And they're going to have a period probably there about a month long where they can convene these meetings and they can try to solve this situation. There's only one route that they're going to take to try to solve this situation. When their butts really get on the fire, like right now they're being all hawkish. Oh, hawkish, hawkish, hawkish. When their butts really get on the fire, you're going to see what uber doves, what doves they are. You're going to see their whole position change on everything. They're not, you've never seen anyone so that's going to be so helpful in your entire life as changing their monetary position and doing a 180-degree turn from what they are right now. Right now, they're going off in this position, we're going to cut this, and we're going to cut that, and we're going to sell our toxic balance book, and we're going to do reverse quantitative easing, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that right now. And they're all full of themselves. When this crisis hits, this is going to put the fear of God into them. They are going to make a 180-degree turn. They're going to go back to their monetary policies. I could almost bet on it. I say there's a 99% chance that that's what they will do. But now what we're going to discuss is what would happen if they decide not to. Not to convene in meetings, not to do anything about the crisis, not to fix it with monetary policy, to stay pat and let the banks try to fix it themselves through, instead of a bailout, let the banks try to fix it themselves with a bail-in. If they hold the line and they say, okay, we're going to keep raising interest rates, let the banks do a bail-in. Okay, so we're going to discuss what would happen if they take that route. And I say there's only a small chance and only a small possibility that they will take that route. But we're going to discuss what would happen if they take that route, and it's not going to be pretty. I would say there's a very small chance that they'll take that route. But if they decide to take that route, it's going to be detrimental to them too. And when I say detrimental, I mean that's a huge understatement. It's not going to be detrimental to just us. If they think that they're sitting up there in that ivory tower and that it's only going to affect us peons, us little guys, they're dead wrong. Because it's going to get them too. It's going to bite them too. Just like a snake, it's going to swing around and bite them in the ass. They're not just us. It's going to be them too. It's going to be them that's on the line as well. And I'm going to explain to you how. What will happen is all of these just-in-time delivery systems that we have, the whole system is set up to run on credit. Credit that comes from the banks. And if the banks suddenly have to do a bail-in to adjust this, all of the people out there, all of them, are gonna do bank runs. They're not gonna. People out here, we're not gonna sit there and let the banks do a haircut without doing bank runs. The people, we're all gonna decredit our accounts. This will continue the lockup of the banking system. So the banks then will just lock up. They'll have to close their doors for good. They will be bankrupt, quite seriously. What that'll lead to next is the bankruptcy of the banks. If the Fed doesn't step in, the banks will really go bankrupt. What that'll lead to next is credit being pulled away from all of these just-in-time delivery systems and everything that runs this entire system. And the system will collapse into anarchy. If they think that they can, for 1 minute, that they can control this anarchy, if the entire system collapses, they're kidding themselves. They will be undermanned, tremendously undermanned. Even if they call it the military, they'll be tremendously undermanned. They won't be able to cover it. Plus, an awful lot of the people, if they that are working within the military, the police, everything else, are going to say to themselves, hey, you know what? We're not going to get paid. The whole system's just fell, collapsed, gone. Poof. They're going to say, heck, I'm hopping in my Humvee. It's got a half a tank of gas. How far is it to home? I got to check on my family. So if they think that they're going to maintain duty and do what they're told, When the system really collapses, they got another thing coming. They're going to head home. They're going to hop in the Humvee and drive home. Half of them. And when the other half sees that half leaving their post, you think the government thinks, hey, you know what? We got total obedience from these people. What they don't realize, these people have minds of their own. These people, if they think that they have total obedience, they don't. These people care more for their family than they do for the government. The government can't believe that. The government thinks to themselves, oh, they'll never leave us. They'll always serve us. Right? This is what the government thinks in their naivety. But it's not true. They think more of their families than they do you, government. So when the push comes to shove, when the system starts to break down, these guys aren't idiots. They're going to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to get our check next week because the system's just SHTF. These guys, in fact, know more about this than you could ever imagine. And when the time comes, they're just going to hop in their Humvee and head home to protect their own family. And so the other servicemen see them leaving, and they say, you know what? Why am I staying here? And they head home too. They abandon. And there wouldn't be enough of them to cover everything anyway, if the whole system falls apart in the madness. So this is what would happen if the Federal Reserve decides to not support the too big to fail banking system. If they let the too big to fail banking system fail, and it is failure if they decide that they're not going to bail them out. If they're going to let them bail in, it's total failure. It'll be failure, and the system will melt down. The entire system will melt down into total anarchy and chaos. Now, these bankers, they might think, well, okay, the system just melted down to total chaos. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to escape into our underground facilities. And we'll keep our few guardsmen that are loyal to us, our inner circle, to protect us. So they head off in their bus or whatever to their underground facility, and they're going to go down the elevator into their underground facility, and they got their guards that's loyal to them. Oh, that sounds all well and good, yeah. Yeah, that's great. It's great. For them. But not for us, but for them. That's great. And this is what their plan. This is what their plan would be. This is what their plan would actually have to be. Their loopy plan would have to be to let the system collapse and melt down. They would have to have some sort of loopy plan that they're gonna save themselves. Unless they're suicidal, of course. So they got this loopy plan, they're gonna save themselves, and they all go down to their underground facility. And they're all in down there, and they shut their steel tin can door behind them up top, you know, and they got their guards in there and everything, and they got enough food to last 10 years, and air and water. They even got air-making machines and everything. They recycle their compost and manure and everything down there. You know, they got it all, right? So they're down there, and they feel pretty confident. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen up top side. The world's going to melt down completely into total anarchy, almost like a Mad Max movie. But something that these guys forgot that's in these underground facilities, something they're forgetting about, is the world now runs on nuclear power. And why they run it on nuclear power has all got to do with greed. It's these same fat cats, these same what do you call it? They've all went to college. They go to college until they're like 50 years old. They're what do you call it? Academics. They're lawyers and everything. They run the system, right? These fat cats that run the system. They've all made a lot of money from these nuclear power plants. And the reason why is because these nuclear power plants produce a tremendous amount of electricity. More than a coal-fired plant. And they can produce that power for almost nothing. But it's not really clean energy. They're constantly making spent nuclear fuel as they go along, and they create all of this energy. But they do produce a tremendous amount of energy. This is why they got all these nuclear plants everywhere, because they make a lot of money off of this. This is almost like having a license to print money, because they sell the power to us. And so they got these nuclear plants, and they're even putting in more. They're not taking them out. They're not decommissioning them. They're putting in more. Well, all of these nuclear plants, roughly, they run off the same idea. And when I was in high school, I think I was like 10th grade or 9th grade or something, they used to give us diagrams and stuff showing how these nuclear plants used to work back in those days. I don't know if they do anymore, but back then they used to show us how a standard nuclear plant works. They showed us how they got different kinds of rods they drop in. And one rod cools it, and then they run water through, and they got steam turbines that run the nuclear plant, and they had another rod that they put in that slows the reaction down and whatnot, right? Then they have to keep feeding these rods down into the thing, you know? And as they feed the rods down in, they create heat, and the heat runs the turbines and stuff. Now, they got a situation that can happen if the technicians aren't there to turn the valves on and to turn the valves off every 12 hours or whatever. They got to turn one valve on, they got to turn another water valve off, and they got to check on this system and check on that system. And they got this big thing. It's like in Homer Simpson, you know, in The Simpsons, where he sits there and he's watching that big thing full of knobs and buttons and stuff. That's Homer's job. And to pull the knob once a day or whatever to keep the plant running. And they got the technicians there to do that. If they don't do that, what happens is they get something that's called the China syndrome. This is when the thing melts down. This is what happened at Fukushima, the nuclear reactor of Fukushima. It melted down. Okay? Now, luckily, the prevailing winds in Fukushima blew out over the Pacific Ocean. Luckily, it didn't blow toward Tokyo. Because right now, everybody in Tokyo would have two heads if the winds blew toward Tokyo. So what they did was they polluted the entire Pacific Ocean. Oh well, you know. And Chernobyl polluted a tremendous area a few years earlier. But that's just two nuclear reactor plants, right? In this case, what we would have, if we have a meltdown of the system, we're not just going to get a meltdown of the system, we're going to get a meltdown of all the nuclear reactors on Earth. Okay? We're going to get a China syndrome every 20 miles that there's a nuclear plant in almost every state in the Union, including Japan, all these other countries that have nuclear plants too. They're all going to melt down, and the radiation that's going to come off of all of them is going to rain down over the entire planet. It's going to soak us in radiation for years. So, it's going to be like Bikini Atoll was after they dropped the nuclear weapons on Bikini Atoll. That place, you couldn't go near it for 20 years. It'd be a similar situation except it'd be the whole Earth for 20 years. You wouldn't be able to come to the surface for 20 years. Now, so let's go back to these guys down there, and they've pulled the top on top of their base. They've clunked the top shut, and they're down in there, and they're hunkered down there, and they say, everybody on the surface is at it. But we're down here, and we've wreaked havoc, and now we're going to do what the Georgia Guidestone says, and only 500 million people left on the earth, and this is going to be great, and we can stay down here, and we got 10-year food supply. Right? Well, buddy, you just miscalculated. Because you're going to have to stay down there for 20 years. And do you have enough air down there for 20 years? Because the air on the surface is going to all need to be filtered. And your filters are only going to last for 6 months. And the place in Hangzhou, China that makes your filters is now radiated. The filters out the radiation. So in a few months when your filters get plugged, you're going to need new filters, and the factory that makes them doesn't make them anymore. And your food supply is really, they said they were bragging, and they said you had a 10-year food supply. Well, actually, it's more like a 2-year food supply. You know, in reality. Sorry. After about 2 years from now, you're all going to be dead, too. Even in your underground, and these are the top-notch underground facilities, if you can't go to the surface and you can't be resupplied. And I'm sorry, but you're not going to get resupplied. I'm sorry, because now you've destroyed the surface world. For the next 20 years, everything's going to be irradiated. Nothing's going to be able to live up there except cockroaches because of your nuclear power plants and your greed that you had to build them all, here, there, and everywhere. And you didn't decommission them in time. And now, because the financial system has melted down, it's caused a meltdown of every nuclear power plant on Earth. Sorry, it's all melted down. It's melted down because the technicians couldn't get to do their job. Well, you ask why. Why couldn't the technicians get to do their job? Well, it's because the zombies got them. And you say, oh, is there really such a thing as zombies? Well, actually, no. But they've trained the military to shoot anybody that looks sick. They call them a zombie, and they shoot them. And, of course, there's a lot of those out there, a lot of those people that look sick, and the reason why is because they couldn't get their medication. You say, well, why couldn't they get their medication? They couldn't get their medication because you shut down the system and you don't take credit anymore. The drugstore don't take credit. They come to the counter and they said, I need my medication. And they said, well, we only take cash today. And they said, I don't have any cash. We don't use any cash. Nobody uses cash anymore. You were trying to get rid of cash. You were doing your best to get rid of cash through the whole world so that you could do negative interest rates policy. You idiots. You total idiots. That's what I'm starting to think they are. I'm starting to think that they're a bunch of academics, but they haven't thought things through very well. So they got a little window here. This thing's coming. There's no way around it. It's coming. They got a little window here that they can save us. Now I'm going to discuss how they can save us. Now I talked about what's going to happen if they let this thing go and they let this thing melt down. Now I'm going to talk about how they can save us, and they can actually save us. It's called a reset, by the way. That's how they save us. They're going to have to get in there, and they're going to have to follow their Keynesian principle. And their Keynesian principle, they're going to have to destroy the deflation, the deflationary period that comes. Instead of making the banks do a bail-in, they're going to have to bail out the banks again. They're going to have to not let the too big to fail banks go down and fail. Because if they allow these too big to fail banks to go down and fail, we're all dead, including them. I've explained it now, how this whole world's just going to melt down, basically. Unless they bail out the too big to fail banks. And what a bailout means is instead of letting them bail in other words, take the money from the people in the bank, the creditors, they're going to have to give them government money. They're going to have to create the money and give it to the banks all over again like they did in 2008. Except this time it's going to require an astronomically more amount of money. Well, you say to yourself, wouldn't that cause a hyperinflation? Well, yes, it is going to cause a hyperinflation. And I think there's about a 99% chance that the Feds are going to, the Fed and the central banks on Earth are going to keep cool heads in this situation, and they're going to realize that they have to do their duty and they have to bail out these banks. I think there's about a 99% chance that that's what they will do, and I think they'll do it in time. But it's going to lead to a hyperinflation. It's going to lead to a destruction of the dollar. In a way, this is actually a good thing for the governments, because this is going to get them out of debt. You see the debt? I've had most of my video, a picture of the debt. That debt's going to get extinguished. Extinguished. Because by the time it costs $1 trillion for an egg, that $21 trillion U.S. debt's not going to seem so big anymore. But then again, your bank account's not going to seem very big either, even if you've got $1 million in there. Okay, so it's like a get-out-of-jet debt-free card. Then comes the reset, and this is how we get out of this situation. Because what they need to do then is they need to bring out a new monetary system run on some new form of currency. New currency that has value. And lie if you have to. I know that they don't have any gold in Fort Knox, but go ahead and lie. Say that you do. And say that you're backing the new currency with gold. In fact, you could even take a little bit of gold and make the new currency with gold in it. Go back to making actual currency. Once you've done the reset, you don't have to worry about negative interest rates anymore. Once you've reset everything and you've brought out a brand new currency with a new value to it, you got this little plastic strip in the new currencies. take a little tiny sliver of gold and silver. That's like, they can press gold and they can press the silver down into a very, very thin plates. So they can press gold down so thin that you can actually see through it. It's called gold leaf. So take gold leaf and silver leaf, very thin plates of gold and silver, cut them into little tiny squares or strips, and embed them right in the bills. Put a penalty on it for anybody that tries to remove those strips out of the bills. A very, 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 very severe penalty. Have the FBI go right after them if they try to remove those. Make it very severe. And put it right in the bills. And make it so it's a part of the bill so that immediately you see it. So if somebody's exchanging money and they see one that's got one missing, that money's valueless. Has to go back and be redone or whatever. You know, and if anybody tries to take those out, they would get in a vast amount of trouble for removing them. And they'd trace the bill right back to that guy. So, I mean, they could catch the guy immediately almost, because he goes to the store and tries to spend one. He's removed one of those to get the gold out of it. The store immediately would say, hey, where's the gold in this bill? It's in the clear part of the bill. They'd be able to see it immediately. It's not gold. It's what'd you do? What'd you do? Did you take this out? And the guy says, no, I didn't do that. And they say, oh, yes, you did. And they get on the phone. 5 minutes later, he's under arrest. And they're in his house searching for it, and they find it. And then he's going to the federal penitentiary for 30 years. You know? They put that kind of a penalty on it, nobody will try it on. Because it'll just be plain stupid. You know, put that kind of a penalty on it. Fix it that way so that our bills got a value to them, embedded right in them. They could do that. That's one option. Another option is to say that they're backing the bills with gold and silver that's stored in Fort Knox. Even if it's not in Fort Knox, lie. Because this is an important situation, lie. And say that the gold's from Fort Knox. Say we got 8,000 tons in Fort Knox, and we're backing all the bills with a certain amount of gold that's in Fort Knox to give it power. Bring out your new monetary system, roll it out with big fanfare and everything else. And this is basically a reset. And don't go back to attaching debt to it. Don't go back to this stupid Ponzi scheme that we've been running that's caused this situation in the first place. Straighten this out. It'd be a new start, a new way to straighten everything out again and get everything back straight again the way it should be. You know? A new start. And the system would start up and start running, and we would start to have, we would go back to having real consumers with real money in their pocket. The system would be stimulated. It would be flushed. The system will flush itself. And we'll go back to a real strong economy once again that's run with a backing of gold and silver behind it. Economy that's based on gold and silver. For 7,000 years, we had an economy that was based on gold and silver, and it ran like a smooth clock. 1971, Nixon took us off of the gold standard, and they attached, instead of being on the gold standard, they attached the dollar to oil. And they used force, brutal force, to maintain that ever since. But what it come down to is, it come down to aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers were the most effective way to maintain the petrodollar for years and years and years. All you had to do is very simple. You could move them anywhere. See, this is what made them so great, the aircraft carriers. You could move them anywhere. So if you had a situation developing in I don't know, some country like Venezuela, right? You could bring the aircraft carriers in, park them just offshore, and then bomb the hell out of the guy until he's not in power anymore. If he didn't support the petrodollar. See? So the aircraft carriers worked great until Russia come along and invented these new missiles, these new cruise missiles called aircraft carrier killer missiles. that can fly hundreds of miles out to sea and blow up an aircraft carrier, and they can be launched from land. And these countries that can get these missiles can hide them in a barn. So the aircraft carrier now comes in close to get in close so that they can fly these missions in deep within the country, and they come right up close to the shore. And now they just wheel the aircraft carrier killer out, and they shoot it, and boom, an aircraft carrier sunk from just a small missile. What this has done is this is just very recently, this is rendering the aircraft carriers antiquated, basically. It's antiquating them. Because if they can't get in close enough to attack, if they have to stay way the heck out to sea, then by the time they get into the country that they're trying to attack, they've got to turn back around and head out. They need refueling again before they can dump their load of bombs. Unless they want to dump them right on the shore. I mean, if they have to stay out there hundreds of miles away from the country because of these aircraft killer missiles, to stay out of range of the aircraft killer missile, they have to get out of the range of the aircraft that are on the decks of the aircraft carrier. So it just doesn't work anymore. It's not really practical. So they've got these aircraft carriers sailing around everywhere out there in the ocean right now. And they're still mighty. They're still mighty because they've got them. But they've reached a point now where it's dangerous to use them in a practical battle. They got to be very careful. They got to do intelligence first to find out if the country that they're going to attack has these carrier killer missiles or not. Because even if they just got one, it could be very problematic for the carriers. You know, and Russia's decided to equip all these countries with these carrier killer missiles for free, boys. Here, take carrier killer missiles. We'll give them to you. Practically for free. Well, maybe they don't give them to them for free, but this is the idea. The general idea is to sabotage the United States' dominance. China's making the carrier killer missiles, and so is Russia, and the whole idea is to attack America's dominance on the open sea so that they cannot protect the petrodollar anymore. And if they cannot protect the petrodollar militarily speaking, the petrodollar is going to collapse. And this is just, the whole thing is just a giant circle. Can you see it? Leading to a collapse of the West. But a collapse of the West, this is why the Chinese and the Russians have tried to protect their own banking systems by creating a secondary system, basically. You know? And they see this coming. They're smart enough to see all this coming. They're going to try to keep their countries up and running through the whole thing. Because they're scared that the West is actually going to collapse and going to freeze. So we're heading into an awful mess. I don't know how it's all going to actually pan out because it hasn't really started quite yet. It's a slow motion collapse. It's already begun, but it's kind of begun. It's not really begun yet. It hasn't really. It's like it's still running, but it's slowly collapsing. It's strange how it's all happening, but it's all happening now, right before our eyes. We need to prepare for it. We need to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I personally don't think we're going to get the worst. I think the Fed is going to maintain cool heads, and I think they're going to step in and prevent a total meltdown. Let's hope that they're smart enough to prevent a total meltdown. Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye.